Well, what is up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 64 of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined once again by the one, the only Nyah Carlson. How you doing today, Nyah?
I'm great. I'm thriving. How are you?
I don't know if I'm thriving, but I'm getting there. I will be thriving after an episode of talking
You're
about faith and pop culture.
almost there. Yeah.
Because there's some fun stuff to talk about today. A lot of stuff going on in culture. Kind of a whole range of some things that are encouraging, some things that maybe will make some Christians anxious, some things that just I think are worth wrestling through, regardless of where you land on that. But why don't we kind of jump into the first, because something that actually happened a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, that we just didn't mention, but I think it's worth talking about because it's, I don't know, we'll get into this, but I find it encouraging and maybe it goes against some sort of cultural narratives, and that is what seems to be a bit of like a anti-social media movement. It seems like people are sort of waking up and realizing this is actually terrible for us. Like I don't benefit in any way from this social media.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't have to, constantly be consumed by this. Maybe the grass is greener on the non-digital side. So what is some of the stuff that's happened? Because there's been several things kind of happening in culture that that at least sort of point towards this development. But what are some of the stuff that
Yeah.
you've seen happening?
Yeah. Well, you and I both know that social media is most of the times a time suck, but it's hard, I think, to delete it because of FOMO, the fear of missing out, which I suffer from greatly. But I think my generation, Gen Z, my favorite generation, it has done a really good job at kind of coming together and encouraging each other to delete things and be like, hey, you're not really missing out of all of these scrolling things. So on October 10th, there was a delete day staged by I don't know if it's like a company or a movement or something called Time to Refuse, and I'll link it in the show notes, where young people, I think mainly Gen Z, gathered in Tompkins Square Park to delete social media together and then have a big party after. So it looks super fun. And then YouTuber Anthpo, he's known for going undercover as Kid with Crocs and staging like a Timothy Chalamet lookalike contest where Timothy showed up, or eating a container of cheese balls in front of a massive crowd of people. But he went undercover as a lovable, sweet old man named John Chungus because he just got Chungus or something, and convinced people on September 27th to go outside and touch grass together, which it's ironic that like the whole campaign was done on social media, so to know about it you had to be on social media.
Make sure you scroll on social media to find out how we are going to be doing away with social media.
Definitely.
It's funny. It just seems like there's lots of these things popping up, and obviously, I mean, I don't want to be too cynical here because I try not to be. Part of me wonders if, like, when are we going to schedule the re-download day for social media? I know, it's always easy to delete one time. It's harder to let it stay deleted. But I'm curious because you actually, I don't know if you weren't doing this connected to these movements necessarily, but you are a Gen Z that did in fact delete. I don't know if I know some of your social media. Like, how is that going for you? Do you feel that, like, your eyes twitching, your finger just, it's like, I need to be Instagram, I need to be like, how is that going for you in a post social media world?
A little bit. I definitely wasn't. The accounts are still there and everything. Their apps just aren't on my phone. And I wasn't as addicted as other people because I had one of my besties, Julia, put a passcode on the time limit. So I didn't know it, so I couldn't override it. So that's a hack if you still want to have it, but not not override it. Anyways, it's interesting because I'm trying to also, when I get home, put my phone in my room and do everything off my phone, like after work hours. And that's when I feel like, oh, what time is it? Let me check my phone, when I'm literally wearing a watch. And then that's the hard part, is not constantly picking it up to look at it and always having it on your person.
Yeah, because I know, and it totally is just a habit too, because I know, like, even like when me and my wife will be watching a show together or doing something, and
Mhm.
it's or even with my kids, and it's like, okay, well, now there's a commercial, and it's like almost without thinking, like we both just reach for our phone, and it's
Yeah.
like as though a whole lot happened, to check in on in those
Mhm.
5 minutes that we watched the show. Like, oh, now someone new. And the thing is, like, I wouldn't say I necessarily am addicted to like the social media aspect. Like, I follow
Mhm.
sports and things on my phone. Like, I have other ways to break the connection. I do think I've tried to do it more. The just leave the phone. Like, keep the account. I kind of need the accounts for work and some other stuff, but
Yeah.
like in the evening, just guard like when I'm allowed to
Mhm.
have it on me, and I don't do that well. This is at least
Mhm.
my intention is like leave it upstairs, go check it at these times. But I do think it's interesting because obviously, you know, a group of people showing up to have a party and deleting it does not necessarily mean like we are past the, in our post
Mhm.
social media world. But I do think there is sort of this like sense that people have that like the genie is out of the bottle and you can never put it back. Like it's people are just going to be addicted to this for the rest of time and there's
Mhm.
nothing we can do about it. And I don't know, like I'm not quite as like hopeless about it as I think some of the cultural narratives. Like I think things like this change. Like people adapt.
Yeah.
I think a lot of cultural movements and stuff are always sort of a pendulum of we sort of go this way and it's bad, and people sort of realize it's bad and they miss, they want something else. They want to react and be, it's cool to not have social media.
Mhm.
And now this becomes the thing. And now there's people like, I don't know. Like, I think because again, I'm a father of kids that don't yet have a phone, but are gradually approaching the age where I'll have to navigate this a little bit more. And
Mhm.
so I do wonder, just like their generation, you know, is it a foregone conclusion that there's just going to be a bunch of kids, just young adults on their phone all the time, or
Yeah.
will it? And the thing that I kind of think of too, which isn't a direct comparable, but it's even like with filmmaking. Like I know sort of CGI and some of the digital technology was like movies are changed forever. We got the volume and the Mandalorian. It's like everything needs to be this. Like everything's a green screen. We can do things we could never even dream of doing. And it's sort of this idea that like, classic filmmaking is going to be gone. And then, a couple of decades or so of that, or just a decade or so of that, it's like, well, this isn't very good. Like sort of the
Well,
novelty wore off.
Mandalorian did a great job because it's the LED wall, so there's not too much CGI for that. But
Yeah, but
definitely
even
like
but even that, like, I feel like
Avatar, yeah.
yeah, I mean, Avatar is maybe a special case because it looks so good, but there is a lot of the Marvel movies or just
Uh-huh.
the
Oh yeah.
action-y movies, like the not just to pick on Marvel, but like my family was watching the Superman movie the other day, and the new
Mhm.
one, like the James Gunn, it's like it's fine, but I don't know, it's just a lot of glossy, you know, characters, are hung by wires, moving around to a green
Yeah.
screen. It's just nothing of it feels at all like tactile or like that you can actually reach out and touch it. And I think you see there's sort of this movement of, well, this seemed exciting, but it's kind of empty. And people actually, there's something about sort of that more tactile feel that people want. And I do wonder if that will be the case with things like phones and social media, and where it's, like obviously I don't think that they're ever going to go away. I think that
Mhm.
is sort of this digital world that we're in, and we're not going to be like a non-digital world. But I don't know. I do
Yeah.
think that like seeing Gen Z and then my kids are Gen Alpha, kind of seeing some of this movement and hope. Like I don't know. I hope that there is sort of this counter movement of, hey, it's actually good just to hang out with people and delete our
It
social media, and or even just find
definitely.
healthier ways to navigate it than I think some of like the older generations did. So I don't know. Are you
Mhm.
encouraged like by
Oh, for sure. It's my favorite generation. I think we're doing great. Yeah, it's interesting though that you're talking about like if it's a trend or something, because I think it is different from filmmaking and from CGI because it's something you can access literally constantly. At this point it does feel like it's ingrained into society now, which obviously like can change, but I think it might be a little more worrisome than CGI. But this is very, very um encouraging for sure.
Yeah, and I do think you're right. So much of it, I think, comes down to this fear of, like I
Mhm.
think there is an addictive quality that it, gives us little pleasure jolts of, oh, we're scrolling, we see things, it's,
Yeah, it's the
like there is sort of that
dopamine.
aspect to that, but I think there is sort of that, like, well, if I deleted it, then I wouldn't be able, I'll miss out on things or I won't
Mhm.
understand the references or thing, which I think does make it harder for, like, it's almost like there has to be a big movement for there to be any movement, because
Yeah.
there needs to be enough people sort of like, hey, we can do it, and now we're all sort of out of touch of the
Yeah.
digital stuff together. But I don't know. I thought we would mention that
hmm
just because
But
I
then,
do think it is.
yeah, all the content creation jobs will be gone too. Like, there's a whole industry that's just been created from TikTok and from YouTube, which is insane to me. But also, like, that's kind of our job at the same time.
Yeah, and even like I know
So,
my kids are 10, they're in 5th grade, and like all of them want to be like YouTubers, and
yeah,
it's not like, hey, I want to be a athlete or I want to be a this or that. It's like they want to be a TikTok star. Like that's sort of their.
yeah.
So yeah, there is. I don't know. I think maybe it will take a while, but I'm at least a little bit
hmm
encouraged. But speaking of things that I think are making people feel a little uneasy, kind of another story that's been going on. And I need to be careful because I can't necessarily, there's things I can't say about this. But there's a new movie coming out next week, The Carpenter's Son. And this is one actually, me and Sam, back before the pre-Nyah days, me and Sam talked about this on the podcast.
Must have been
when
terrible.
I needed to get you to give the real opinion now of
That's
just,
right.
but when the trailer for this, The Carpenter's Son dropped, me and Sam kind of got into it a bit because this is unlike other Bible movies. This is, I mean, for one, it stars Nicolas Cage, so
Our close
that
and
makes it,
personal friend.
yeah, that makes it noteworthy. But it's a horror movie, and it seemed like that can go a lot of different ways. Making a Jesus movie as a horror film seems like it's opening the door for just absolute blasphemy, or maybe it's a creative approach, and so there's a lot to it, and we're going to get into horror movies in just a second. I've seen the movie. I'm not allowed to like share my review of the movie yet, although I will just say, encourage you guys, check out my review, because I will definitely, I will have some thoughts on this film. So check it out. I won't tell you what I'll say, but I will say kind of a part of this movie that I think is part of like the marketing and stuff. It's already out there. Is just like what this movie is based on, because this seems to be kind of continuing a trend that's been going throughout Hollywood and these sort of Bible adaptations, especially the ones that are from like outside of the mainstream sort of faith-based entertainment complex of,
hmm
it's not Angel Studios or the Chosen, or the Wonder Project. It's sort of the ones like Hollywood, like
Who
I think it was
did
that.
it?
I
Do you
think it's
know?
like an
I can look it
independent.
up.
Like I don't think it was released through a major studio. Like this is,
Okay.
I think, more of like an independent project. And then like I know like the Mary movie that released on Netflix, I think last year, was similar in that it was based on some stuff. And kind of what sets this movie apart, again, I won't get into necessarily my thoughts on the movie itself, but is that this movie is about Jesus, it's about Joseph, it's about Mary, sort of their family, particularly the kind of their time after they fled in Egypt, sort of the childhood of Jesus, which is sort of an area of the Bible, the gospel stories, that there just isn't a whole lot on. Like we know he goes down there, we know he comes back. We have a couple stories of him as a kid, like being lost and being found in the temple, or there's a couple of these stories like where you get a picture, a glimpse of him as a kid, but then he's an adult, and then he's like going into his ministry, and he's like 30, and we sort of miss that time. So in some ways, this film is sort of centering in on this is like the untold story of Jesus and what it's based on, because there are documents, kind of ancient documents that do detail some of this. Particularly this film, as like an opening title card for the film says, that it is based on the infancy gospel of Thomas. And I'll be honest, this is one that I know more Christians are maybe familiar with, the Gospel of Thomas. That's
hmm
the one that like the Da Vinci Code is sort of based on, or the Mary movie, or the Book of Clarence. I think that was last year. Kind of the Jesus kind of
Yeah.
adjacent story was very much sort of based on the Gospel of Thomas, which is a apocryphal literature that was written later that the church has always rejected. The infancy Gospel of Thomas is a different document, just as rejected by the church, but really it's short too. You can find the whole thing on Google. It's just like a series of almost short stories of Jesus as a kid, and I mean it's wild. Like it's
Have you read the Apocrypha?
the Apocrypha.
Like, oh,
I've read.
have it right here.
Yeah, in fact, I was reading that this morning. No, so I haven't read all the documents. I do think there is sort of some confusion of sort of what these documents are, because like the Apocrypha, like this one, which wouldn't include things like the Gospel of Thomas, because there's sort of the Apocrypha that is documents that like other, like the Catholic Church has more books than we do, or different religious Christian traditions. They have this book of the Bible that, the Protestant movement doesn't accept, or the sort of the Orthodox Bible. And so there sort of are these other documents that there was this disagreement on. And I don't know, some of those documents I think are interesting, even if
Mhm.
you accept them as like, this isn't inspired scripture, but it's an ancient document. And there's lots of reasons why it was maybe rejected. Not that it was necessarily even bad. It just, it didn't meet the criteria that the church was looking for. But then you
Mhm.
have sort of the more outlandish ones, like the infancy Gospel of Thomas, or the Gospel of Thomas, which were documents that were written. I mean, like Jesus was a very famous person, especially after this Christian movement
I
launched.
would agree.
And, and there were just lots written about him. Like he became this very key figure, a whole growing movement. Um, and I mean, anyone that could write a story about him. So
Mhm.
you get some of these other documents like the Gospel of, or the Gospel of Thomas, or the infancy Gospel, that are essentially like Jesus fan fiction. Like the infancy Gospel, which is what the Carpenter's Son is based on, is just wild. Like it's Jesus as a kid, but like he's a total brat. Like he's sort of going around and he's almost like bullying kids. Like he straight up kills a kid for like looking at him the wrong way, and like, he sort of like uses his.
This is
It's
in the
almost, this is the
infancy
infancy
gospel?
gospel. Like it's almost like there's, like he almost like more like a magician. Like it reminded me almost of like a Wheel of Time or something, where it's
Huh.
like you have this young kid
Mhm.
with all this power, and it's like, well, is he going to be good, or is he going to be bad? And a lot of
Mhm.
people, he has all this power, the Son of God, and he can like kill people, and he kind of feels bad about it. And he's sort of this like brat, and he's like egging everyone on. And it's, some of the story is like, what is he going to grow up to become? Will he go evil or bad? Which, I mean, you can see why the church is like, yeah, that's not, this doesn't fit. There's things about, there's things just detail wise that conflict with the details in the more reliable um, kind of gospels. So like it's
Mhm.
not an accepted biblical text, but I think it gets treated as that. Like it's like, well, because it's ancient, therefore it must be reliable, which is just, I mean, it's nonsense. People could write anything. It's like centuries after Jesus's death that these documents came out, and a lot of them had like an agenda to fit into different
Mhm.
like religious, like the Gnostics and different things. That it's like, let's sort of frame Jesus in a way that fits our sort of cult religious approach, and we're, even if it's not consistent, and or just, like, I mean, I don't know what the motivation for the infancy gospel was, if it was just playing around like a fictional uh, a fictional tale. But I think it is, I don't know, what's interesting to me though is that these are the ones that it seems like Hollywood keeps coming back to. Like they're, because there's been
Yeah.
a lot of like, I mean, again, not, and I mean, even like the House of David kind of did this with some of its, I don't know, did you watch through the House of David now?
I saw the first episode, which is
Okay.
great. I just haven't been able to
Yeah,
continue
because
it.
they get into sort of like the Nephilim, like the angels coming down and having,
Oh, interesting.
like, which is, again, that part is biblical, but not a whole lot is known about that. Like that was my first
Mhm.
seminary project. Actually, had to write a paper and figure that out. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
gosh, I,
Did you
I don't know
figure
what's.
it out?
Yeah, I finally did crack it, but I haven't published it yet, so people are still in
Okay.
doubt.
That'll be
But
next week.
but even some of what the show did for that, they based it on sort of these legends and things, like some of the character name that is not biblical, like it's
Mhm.
apocryphal literature. Maybe not as like
Hmm.
concerning apocryphal literature as like the Book of Enoch and some things that the show was pulling from. But it just is interesting because I think there is sort of this tendency to, for Hollywood to be drawn to, and like apocryphal, like the word I think means like hidden away, or secret thing.
Hmm.
Like it's
Mhm.
it's sort of like the untold story of Christianity. And I think you can see why Hollywood filmmakers would be sort of intrigued by, this like mysterious, the side that people don't know. And because it is fictional, it, I mean, it plays fictional. Like it, like you can,
Yeah.
it plays like a fantasy story,
Mhm.
which, I mean, for a non-religious person can make for a good story. But I don't know, like what do you think about some of this? Like I think for me, it's just be aware of some of that. Like just because I know a lot of people like with this Carpenter Son, where like this doesn't seem like the Bible. And it's, well, because it's
Yeah.
not. It's not. It's based on Jesus. It's based on Mary and
Yeah.
Joseph and that story. but like the actual text it's adapting is not the Bible.
Mhm.
And I think that just should, I don't know, set your expectations accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird just portraying someone named Jesus and supposed to be Jesus in a way that's not biblical. Like, that's the weird part. Even if it is fan fiction and it's fictional, it's like it just feels wrong to witness some things with a character called Jesus, you know? And I haven't seen The Carpenter's Son, but like I'm thinking of like The Last Temptation of Christ once again, which also I haven't seen, but it's just yeah, not necessarily that it is wrong to for them to make these films. I don't know enough about it to make that to have that opinion, but for me it feels kind of wrong, you know?
Yeah, I get people having very valid concerns about like because essentially these are like what if stories. Like it's like, well, it's
Yeah.
based on the Bible, but it's kind of this like what if like, imagine
Mhm.
what if Jesus was like this instead, or what if
Mhm.
this was the case and Jesus wasn't perfect and he actually could have gone evil, and what would that look like? And I don't know. I think there's value in that depending on how you approach films, but it
Yeah.
definitely enters some murky territory. And I think kind of related to that because I think one of beyond just the fact that this is the Carpenter's Son is a movie about Jesus that's like not based on the Bible, like that
Yeah.
obviously made people kind of concerned. I think the other
Yeah.
part of it was just like this a horror movie, which you
That's
know,
interesting to me.
yeah, like there's not a
Yeah.
lot of there's a lot of like Bible adaptations and Jesus stories out there, and they're
Mhm.
animated and they're live action, they're comedy. Like we have The Promised Land, like, but I don't know, like I can't. Can you think of any horror? Like I know there's some like Christian horror movies or like religious, like demon possession, that kind of stuff. But as far as
Yeah.
like the Bible, I mean the Bible,
Well, yeah,
as
cuz
far as
this
like yeah, but as far as
isn't.
like the Jesus story, I don't know. Like
Yeah. In a
I feel
way,
like horror is not really on the bingo card.
I mean, how are we defining horror movie? Because I think you could make an argument that the whole Jesus story is like if you stop, especially if you stop at the crucifixion, you can make an argument that it is a horror story. Because like terrible things happen in the Bible, um, and the crucifixion is a horrible thing to happen and to witness.
Yeah, well,
So
I mean, like Mel Gibson's The Passion is like an R-rated film.
yeah.
I mean, like theologically and stuff. I feel like knowing the story, there's a case to be made that like there's. I think Christians can recognize the beauty in that it's not necessarily,
Mhm.
but I mean, just it's violent and it's unsettling intentionally.
Mhm.
So that I think there is, and I think even some of the quotes and stuff from the director of The Carpenter's Son was on that of like, well, there's actually a lot of horror elements in the Bible, like that,
Mhm.
this idea that horror and like faith and stuff are somehow these separate, never shall they meet,
Yeah.
just isn't necessarily true because you can find horror in the Bible. There's even like the story that Jesus tells and the guy's like in hell and he's just parched his mouth. Like there's even Jesus
Mhm.
sort of like, some of these stories relied on horror to tell the story. And I think some of this touches into like, I mean, having a horror movie about Jesus is one thing. I think part of why that's even more concerning is just that Christians struggle with horror in general. Like the
Mhm.
idea, like I feel like that's sort of the genre above almost all others that, at least in my experience, is doing pop culture stuff and
Mhm.
reviews, and that's sort of the like that's the genre Christians aren't supposed to watch. Like that's the bad genre.
Yeah.
That's the irredeemable, non-edifying genre is like horror, and that like I know even earlier this year we had like Candace Cameron Bure,
Mhm.
kind of the Christian spokesperson, actress, talking about how she believes scary movies are like a portal into your home for the occult, and like this idea that
Yeah.
like these spooky horrific things are by their like nature
There's
evil.
valid reasons too for
Yeah, like
that
what are
that
because I think
argument.
because there is, yeah, I don't want to belittle the because I think there is a
Mhm.
lot to it is a tricky genre. But what are some of like I know as we've sort of been thinking through this and just you even as a
Yeah.
filmmaker, like what would like why are some Christians maybe uneasy about like the horror genre?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely also just depends on first personal conviction and what kind of horror movie it is. 'Cause I personally won't watch, like, I don't wanna watch anything that has to do, well, first of all, it's based on a true story because that just freaks me out, and also that has to do with, like, demon possession, and this kind of ties into, like, a lot of reasons why Christians don't think that you should watch horror films because it really can glorify evil spirits and desensitize us to evil, so we become more callous, and it can cause us to take our eyes off of Jesus and focus on kind of the evil, horrible things of the world. And also, we can just easily forget that there is actually a spiritual warfare going on in our everyday lives. And it can kind of glamorize the fear that comes out of it too. So I think those are the main, like, the biggest issues, that glorifies evil spiritual forces, desensitizes us, and glamorizes fear.
Which
Um,
is which is interesting to me to hear you say that, because I feel like I'm actually in some ways on the other side than you are. For me, and I'm not a huge horror guy as far as,
mhm.
um, I love horror in the context of, like, monster movie. Like, Jaws is my favorite movie of all time.
I love
Um,
Jaws.
like, I love, like, A Quiet Place, like, those sort of, like, horrific. I don't know, I love, like, Alien, I love the whole Alien franchise, like,
Mhm.
those sort of fear-based, like, more thriller type. I'm not at all like which I find the part of horror that I think is pretty close to being just utterly irredeemable is sort of the hacker slag, where it's just glorifying the death. Like, it's just, hey,
Yeah.
watch,
Mhm.
here's 10 characters, watch the ways we figured out how to make them die. It's like, well, I don't, I think that you'd have, I think a Christian would be hard pressed to make a case that, like, that's edifying.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
don't
think that,
like Yeah, I don't like horror. Sorry to cut you off. I don't
yeah,
like horror in general. Like, I have a short list of the horror that I like, and it's like most people probably would just call it a thriller too. Like, A Quiet Place, that series is one of my favorite. I guess there's a trilogy now, and I love Get Out, and I love 28 Days Later and 28 Years Later. Um, but yeah, horror is not my favorite at all.
which is funny because I think, because like you're saying, to me the demon sort of the spiritual part can go either way. Like, I think
Yeah.
a lot of, and I think some of it is like how literal do you take, like,
Mhm.
like for me, sort of both, to give both sides of it. Like, I think there is, like you said, okay, that's spiritual evil. Like, we're making it entertainment. Does that sort of make us less open to the reality? Does it sort of
Mhm.
desensitize us to, like, hey, demons are just these weird, creepy creatures that possess people, and it's a horror, and
Yeah.
then we forget that, like, there is a spiritual reality. Or I think the other side, which is maybe more, and I think it depends on the movie too, but it's like, well, or does it just remind us that there is a reality of spiritual things? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like the way they unpack it, and it usually sort of places, like religion, like an equal footing, this battle for, and it's, well, I think the Bible is pretty clear that, like, in a conflict between Jesus and demons, Jesus win. It's
Yeah.
not like this equal thing, and the demons, like, I think they give too much credit to, like, the power of these
Mhm.
demons, when I think Christians just don't need to be worried about that according to
It
scripture.
depends on the movie, and it depends on the person that's watching the movie,
Yeah, and
whether or not they see that. Yeah.
but for me, the horror is, I don't know, like, it is one of the most consistent ways, like, genres that just reminds audiences, maybe even those that, like, aren't bent towards religion, that, like,
Mhm.
you know, that there is this spiritual reality. What would that look like? There are these sort of forces, and it sort of plays around with these fears of the unknown and these spiritual forces. And again, like,
Yeah.
what you do with those, whether it makes you belittle it or makes you like, okay, like, that's serious, I think is up to you, and it's up to, like, how well the
Yeah.
the filmmaker does it. But I did think that is sort of interesting with the spiritual stuff, because that seems to be where the most concern comes from, is like,
Yeah.
and I think some of it's because we take it, or some people will take it pretty literal, of, like, like Candace Cameron Bure. It's like, well, there's demons on screen, like, and they're literal demons, and they're gonna come through your screen into your house if you let them. And it's like, well, no, like, there's probably a guy in a costume or a CGI team. Like, it's like, they're not
It's the motion
demons,
capture, yeah.
like the people on set weren't being possessed by demons, or like they
Hopefully
weren't,
not. Yeah.
like and the irony is like a lot of the greatest horror directors and stuff have come out of either they're Christian or they at least came out of like a Christian background. Like, I think
Mhm.
they've been drawn like this throughout history. That's been the case, and I don't know. It's sort of like the idea that well, the people on set themselves were Satanists because they were playing around with demons. It's like, well, that's not necessarily the case. But I do get it. Like
Mhm.
I do get the concerns about, and I think
Yeah.
you touched on it too. That some of it just depends on how you define horror. Because I think it's sort of like can Christians watch a comedy? It's like, well, are we talking about like a real wholesome, this real funny, rom com with a good message about love, or are we talking about a super raunchy, profane, just filled with nudity and cussing? Like both those are comedies. Like but I think Christians would navigate those differently, like, or
Mhm.
action. Like, is this a fun adventure story, or is it, a more really over the top bloodfest type action movie? Like it's sort of for all these genres. I think I think whenever you simplify it to like, can Christians watch this? And it's like a
Yeah.
broad, this whole collection of diverse films. It's even like, can Christians watch R-rated movies? It's sort of that idea of, well, no, unless it's the Passion of the Christ. It's like, well, like there's like some of those are maybe helpful as a starting point. Like, hey, be
Mhm.
cautious, more cautious about this. But like, they're so diverse. Like, horror
Yeah.
can be a million different things. It can be
Mhm.
just pure fear, and preying on your imagination. It can be more like disgust, like like these slasher movies that is just like let's see how much gore you can take, and you see stories of
Yeah.
like people literally throwing up in the movie theater because they can't take it, and like I don't know, it's like for me, I think a good starting point for the conversation is just like dig into it deeper than just the genre because that
And yeah. There's an interesting point that I saw too that someone said that it humbles us by taking us to a place where we're just throwing up in the movie theater because we're so I don't know if they were scared or grossed out, but let's say they were scared and that can this might be a stretch, but that can like remind us that we need to be fully surrendered to God and to his mercy because some of these forces are real and the world is pretty horrible in some instances, but it reminds us of the goodness of God and of
yeah, because
Jesus.
and I think that's sort of where the positive side, like
Mhm.
I think there's valid concerns. I think the other side is like, well, can it actually be good though? Like, because the case that's always made for horror movies is just like that's sort of the genre where we, it makes us uncomfortable and it makes us feel like we're not in control as much. Like, that's where a lot of the fear comes in. Of you
Mhm.
don't know you don't know what's going to pop out on screen, or, you see sort of this horrific stuff and you're sort of in the theater and you're all tensed up. And it's, I know some of the argument I think is, I mean, I think in some ways, depending on the film and all that conversation, is where I kind of land with it is just, I feel like our lives are so comfortable and safe now. Like, even as Christians, we don't necessarily have to confront evil that much. Like
Mhm.
we go to church and we sing, we're with all our friends and we're at Bible study and we have all these functions we're going to and we're watching The Wonder Project on TV. And, like, it's like we can live our life in a very comfortable, we listen to Christian radio on the drive to work and it's safe and
Mhm.
encouraging for the whole family. Like
Mhm.
I feel like so much of how we've built our life is to like insulate us from having to actually confront horror, and which I mean wasn't the case of the early Christians when like
Mm-mm.
their friends are literally being eaten by lions in a coliseum. Like
Yeah.
I think we're
And
so removed
crucified
from it.
upside down.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
we're so removed from like the not that people don't have hardships and all that, but like we're so removed in our everyday life from fear and horror and grotesque things that I think for me, movies are a place where you can kind of experience those things in a safe environment where it's I'm in a theater or I'm in my house and I'm watching the shark come down the beach and it's horrifying and I'm like, oh, and people are dying and I realize that life's temporary and like you sort of experience that and then the movie's over and you can kind of like process that and kind of let that out. And it for me, it's just sort of a reminder. Like, that's why I love even a movie like Alien or some of these movies that, like there's some violence to it that I think aren't for every Christian's taste, but I think just the reminder, like the experience of feeling fear and like out of control and like this that tension that things aren't okay and
Mhm.
we're not like I think there's a lot of potentially edifying experiences like with that. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
have you watched? I don't know if there's any like particular films or anything, but like, have you experienced any sort of like edifying experiences like in watching a horror film?
Yeah, I'm sure I have. I'm thinking the last one that I saw was actually in theaters was 28 years later, and it was so much scarier than the first one. It's a really good film, and it's very interesting. But it definitely led to some really interesting conversations between me and my best friend and Dusty, my fiance, and also my brother, just kind of in the car afterwards dissecting the ways that Christianity and like specifically the cross was portrayed and how they viewed death. So if anything, it can definitely lead to some really edifying conversations outside of it. And I think like A Quiet Place is, I don't know if you consider that horror, but there's really good characters, really good messages in those films as well. So I think it's
Yeah, I mean, A
definitely
Quiet
possible.
Place. I mean, that's just that's the first movie I ever reviewed actually for the Collision, like A Quiet Place.
Yeah.
A total dad movie too. It's like the dad's like protecting his kids, and it's like, oh, I'm a dad, I gotta protect my kids. Like so many like edifying themes like in there. I think through, and I think some of it too is like like I don't think Christians should linger in darkness all the time. Like I think there's definitely a balance involved, but I think there is also a danger in never stepping foot into
Mhm.
dark. Like not that we like participate in darkness, but that I think the reason why a lot of like faith-based traditionally films just maybe don't resonate is like they're trying to show sort of the beauty of the gospel and Christianity, but be, we're so guarded with how we show evil and like the darkness that it's like, well, it's not sin and evil. It's just sort of like naughty. It's like, well,
Yeah.
he's kind of bad. He's not a nice guy,
No.
and it's like, well, like,
Dangerous.
it's like, well, that's fine, I guess, in some way, but it's you sort of lose some of the like the contrast of like, no, like evil is really bad, and the world is broken and violent, and there's grotesque, and there's all this stuff to it, and as Christians, we know like that makes it even more powerful. Like that makes us understand the need for the gospel in a way
Mhm.
that like, well, he's, the atheist is, now and then he
He's a
drinks a can of
drunk.
beer, he's
Yeah.
really evil. And it's like, well, is that though? Like, I don't know. Like maybe it is. Like maybe that's just too like, and I think they've changed and there are really good
Yeah.
story, but I think there is value in actually just like taking the guardrails off a little bit and like confronting evil things and grotesque things. And as
Yeah.
long as Christians, we stay rooted in, like the Bible says, like live in the light, like as long as we still stay rooted in the goodness and the beauty of the gospel, then I
Mhm.
think, I mean, in some ways, I feel like Christians are of anyone have the least to worry about horror. Like I think we
Yeah.
can see a spiritual, a demon possession film, and like we understand the truth of spiritual powers, and we understand that like
Mhm.
Jesus wins, and that they're powerless against him. Like it, in some ways, like of anyone, we should be the ones that are the least squeamish or like concerned about that kind of stuff because we actually know the true story, where maybe others don't. But
Yeah.
maybe last thing too, like I know even I don't know why this conversation made me think of it, but Inside Out, not a horror movie, in fact, a kids animated movie about emotions. But I think even like for me, that's one of the greatest movies ever made. Like I don't know if you're an Inside Out person. Like I think it's this.
I'm not.
Oh no, yeah. Well,
Sorry.
yeah. Well, hopefully the new co-host next week will be a fan of.
Ah!
To me, like one of the most brilliant movies ever made because I think it's so profound and helps like the way that it unpacks emotions and how we're wired but I think it's one of the things in that is like the whole point of that movie is the way we actually need all of our emotions and like just having
Mhm.
joy and repressing sadness actually is unhealthy and you sort of need joy and sadness together. But like in sort of the head, the emotions that are running Riley and like if you have fear and disgust as two of the emotions, and I think you sort of see like those aren't bad emotions. Like they're bad emotions if they govern us. If we're
Mhm.
just, if fear is in like the driver's seat, or if like disgust and some of that, like then that's maybe bad. But having those emotions is actually healthy. And I think, like, guys, I was thinking of that, like watching a horror movie, like what emotions, from the inside out framework, like as we watch any of these movies, like what ones are we actually appealing to? Like most of the Christian ones are joy, like
Mhm.
that's sort of the, we just want to feel
And
good. And
sadness.
yeah, yeah, sadness, and then the joy at the end that
Sadness and
comes in to,
joy,
to
yeah.
take over. Um, but it's like, well, but are we also, again, not that Inside Out is like gospel in the way they present things, but I do think it's very much like the Pete Docter made it is a Christian himself, and I think a lot of his worldview comes out. Um, but it's sort of like the idea that we need all these emotions, and it's not a bad thing to sort of, you know, now and then kind of prick those emotions and feel them,
Mhm.
and that's actually healthy for our development. And I do think horror is one of those ways that we can just sort of feel things that we don't often feel. But maybe any kind
Yeah.
of final thoughts for you as far as like horror
Yeah.
movies, like as far as like how Christians should navigate it, like any.
Yeah. I mean, I liked what you said too about Christians having like should probably be the ones who are least squeamish. I was reading in Matthew either 12 or 13 this morning where Jesus is talking about like it was all these parables, and he was like, those who have the Holy Spirit are like will understand and have that heart knowledge. And he starts talking about I wish I had my Bible in front of me, but he starts talking about evil spirits and basically how they can't reside in you if you have the Holy Spirit. And it's just a good reminder, and I think we can watch those films like that with that in mind too. And really it might help us understand the world better and be in the world but not of it, and innocent as doves but cunning as snake, as a serpent. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even because I do think, like, as Christians we can give like Satan a lot more power than he's due. Like it's
Mhm.
you sort of hear Christians like blame Satan for everything, like Satan made me do this, Satan's really attacking me or this, and it's like again, they're spiritual forces, and Satan's prowling like a lion, like Scripture talks about that. But like you said, I think when you read Scripture though, you realize, but like Jesus won, and Jesus resides within us. Like
Mhm.
we have the Holy Spirit. Like I don't know, we don't need to be. I think it's actually more unbiblical to attribute too much power to these spirits than it is
Mhm.
to like almost to attribute too little, like to watch these movies or experience some of that. And I think at the end of the day, Christians don't need to worry about it. But yeah, like you said, depends on the movie and how it's handled. But I just think there is so much edifying potential within horror, in moderation and with discernment,
Mhm.
that I think Christians are maybe missing out on some if they
Yeah.
if they totally close themselves. And again, some of it just depends on your personal taste. If you're a horror person, or maybe you just my wife's not a horror person, so I don't force her to watch those movies.
That's good.
But speaking of personal tastes, and perhaps personal tastes that need to be updated and added to with some wise wisdom,
Oh.
the
I thought you were
final
talking about
segment
my
of the
taste.
oh, no, yeah, that's the B-roll. But the final segment of this podcast, we have things we like that you should like too. Well, Nyah, this is your week. I will say as a follow-up before I let you share to last week that I love my children. I want that to be on the record. But like sometimes kids let you down. And I think last week I shared about my love of Sour Patch Kids. And like
Mhm.
I gave my kids the talk. I trained them up the way they should go. Don't take the Tootsie Roll. Don't take the Snickers bar. Take those Sour Patch Kids because, I changed your diapers and I deserve it, as taxes for that. I did not get a single bag of Sour Patch Kids for my kids this year. Like not one.
They didn't
Which
abide on your
I
tariff?
know. So I mean, they'll
Wow.
they'll be grounded for a while, but and they'll learn from it. But I just wanted to let you know that sometimes it's hard to be a parent when your kids so grossly let you down. At least I love them because sometimes it's tricky. But beyond that, this is your week to share something that you, in fact, like. So what's one thing that you should
Yes.
like that you think I and others should like as well?
Forrest Frank. I had to mention him at some point. We can't go a whole episode without talking about him.
Check that off.
No. Check I would say a shoebox of photographs, which is also a Jack Johnson song. Great song. But it's one of the most nostalgic things that you can have. I have a literal shoebox of printed out photographs under my bed. And sometimes I'll just, when I'm off, because I don't have social media anymore, this is my like tangible scroll. I can just go look at photos from I have some from high school, from college, and just remember all the good times that we had, all my friends. And sometimes that even leads to like reconnecting with people or just simply praying for them and for their well-being. So everyone should have at least a couple printed out photos, if not a whole shoebox.
You see, I feel like the more I get to know you, the more I start to think that you're like a boomer in a Gen Z body. Because I feel like in some in some of these ways, like, you know, you got your little shoe bag, you got your little photo album, you're flipping through all your black and white photos of you growing up. Like, but I will
I have
say
my record player.
there is something fun about like actual pictures. Like, you know, I know digital is easy, you can search them, but I know like one of my most the favorite thing is that like my mom every Christmas for years used to make me and my siblings like a scrapbook that was pictures of the whole year. And she did that for like all of our teenage sort of year growing up. And like, I still have them. And like a while ago, I showed my kids them and they flipped through them. And she started doing that for my kids now. Like every Christmas, she'll
That's
give them this little book.
awesome.
And so she just has like at her little workstation, she has like all these photos from all like the year and all the things we did. And I don't know, there's this something that like, I don't know what it is, like being able to like actually touch the photo and like, you know, there's this thing more like tactile to that
Yeah.
memory that I'm a fan of. I don't necessarily have a little shoebox under my bed with photos, but I do like a good physical photo to hold. So I guess I will second this indoor. And
Good.
look
I'm
at your
glad.
shoebox of photos while you chomp on a bag of Sour Patch Kids. Make the
Exactly.
and another thing that you should all do is join us next week, every week, for more conversations. And next week will be, I believe, a good episode because we have a
Yeah.
friend of the show, Joseph Holmes, will be on. He just directed his debut kind of feature film, Jim versus the Universe. So we brought him on the show just to talk about his
Versus
film.
the future.
Versus the future. Not the universe, the future of the universe.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly.
Sorry, Joseph. Tune in next week to find out what the actual title of this movie is. Yeah, Jim versus the Future.
Yes.
Good film. We both saw it. And Joseph's a good guy. He's been on this podcast before. So join us next week because we get into his movie, but also just the Christian imagination. It's a fun conversation. So we hope you will join us then and every Thursday for more conversations on faith and pop culture.